Assistant Professor Operation Management. So these are the objective of the course, especially reference to maintenance management. First, you have to understand the function of maintenance, then objective of maintenance, understand the scope and limitation of different maintenance strategies, then decide the best maintenance strategies which is suitable for your organizations or which organization is going to be implement maintenance related strategies to maximize the production of efficiencies for the given items. The last objective of this particular course is that understand the scope of new maintenance approaches like proactive maintenance, reliability center maintenance, and the total predictive maintenance. Then the outcomes of the course, maintenance management. Point number one, students learn how to choose the right strategies for different operational environment for maintenance. For example, to choose the right strategy for cement industries is different kind of maintenance is used. Right of strategy for steel industry is different. Right of strategies for maintenance for other manufacturing industries different. The next one is knowledge of maintenance planning and scheduling. Then student must understand the safety protocol before implementing any kind of maintenance planning, scheduling or strategy inside the organizations. They must understand the legal aspect and legal requirement of relevant maintenance operations. The fourth, the student learn how to manage the personnel and ensure the maintenance activities are performed efficiently inside the organizations for maximize the production flow from one end to other end. The last, learning techniques for continuous improvements such as total productivity maintenance and root cause analysis. So let's start the sessions. So block one, introduction to maintenance management. Before implementing the maintenance management, first you have to understand how the production process are basically used. The maintenance management is the key pillar of the organizations. So as far as concerned with production, it's a evaluated process, or you can simply go for that is known as conversion of raw material into finishing product. It's known as production. So the raw material basically pass from one end to other end, and they can convert the resourceful input into a quality of outputs. So whenever you go for maintenance management, you have to know the production organizations which are usually concerned with converting input such as raw materials, labor, process into finishing product of higher values at minimum cost, satisfying the customer needs. So as far as concerned with the higher value additions, it is the objective of many organizations to reduce the that is known as minimum cost in every aspect. So in this regard, the maintenance management play a vital role to minimize the cost in every aspect. And the next important part is it also satisfies the internal as well as external customers. The next one is in order to achieve maximum return of investment, the production system will have to minimize the plant downtime, increase productivities, improve qualities, and deliver order to customer in a timely fashion. So in this regard, whenever a company is going to be start, they are basically use large amount of capital investment in the form of raw materials, labors, capitals, and machines. So to minimize the plant downtime as far as concerned with the production activities, or it is basically increase the productivities, you have to use large amount of that is known as maintenance strategies so that they can increase the efficiency of production and efficiently the material should be flow from one end to other end. And it also help in case of improve the qualities and deliver the order to customers in a timely fashion. So the last point is that this is has brought in forefront of the role of maintenance as key functions in any production systems. So the introduction part of maintenance management basically focus upon the is minimization of cost. The next is increase productivities. The next one is improve qualities, and the last one is satisfying customers. Moving to next one, Let's understand what is the fundamental concept of maintenance. So, if you go to the point number one, maintenance is a combination of science, arts, and philosophies. And the next point is it is execute relies on the science, then arts of maintenance depend upon the individual aptitude. Its philosophy should be fit to the operations or organization itself. So, as far as concerned with the maintenance management, nowadays it is a key pillar of organization's success by implementing various amount of that is education science, art of maintenance, and philosophy to fit the operation of the organizations. Point number three, the maintenance involves a combination of activities by which the equipment or the system is kept in or restored to a state in which it can perform its designated functions. So let's take an example of a small automotive garage who have specialized or who had contain various amount of designated machines. So let's say in case of lathe machines perform various amount of turning operations, the drilling machine perform various amount of drilling operations, shaper machine performs various amount of that is known as surface shaping activities. So these dedicated machines, if are not combined in a proper ways, the adequate function of maintenance should be not achieved, and it is directly affect the entire business, entire that is known as production, or entire that is known as operational activities, which is directly, indirectly affected by the maintenance. So the next important part, it is an important factor in product qualities, can be used as a strategy for successful competitions. So as far as concerned with the getting higher side of competitive advantage in the market, many companies is given priorities to their maintenance so that there should not be any kind of known as disruption should be happens in the flow of raw materials or in case of achieving the product qualities so that they are not getting any kind of competitive advantage over the competitors. Moving to next one, the next one we have that is known as maintenance management. So maintenance management is the management of all asset owned by the production organization based on the maximize the return of investment in the asset. So this is achieved by applying general management principles. What are the general management principles? First one is planning of maintenance management, then proper scheduling of maintenance management, then organization of various amount of skilled peoples to different development tasks. And the last and most important part it is known as controlling to the maintenance functions. So let's take a small example of your own motorcycles, which consist of various amount of parts. So if you want to travel from one places to other places, approximately more than 2 to 300 kilometers, in that cases you must focus upon various that is known as maintenance management to your motorcycles. That means that will be start from that is only checking the pressure in tires. Then the next important part proper that is known as lubricating the engines. Then fuel should be properly that is known as filled. The next is other precaution measures should be taken before you ride from one places to other places. So same thing happen in case of organization when they receive any kind of product from the customers. Immediately they focus upon their own capacities. So capacity basically focus upon that is known as man, machine and materials. And whenever they perform operation related activities, that will start from the planning, settling, organizing and control activities. In the same patient manner, you have to focus upon that is maintenance management. It may be day-to-day maintenance management, maybe weekly maintenance management, maybe monthly maintenance management, or maybe quarterly or maybe half-yearly maintenance management should be given to the different designated machines so that they can easily maximize the production activities to make the bridge between demand and supply, which is basically arise from the customers. The next important part is maintenance basically involve a combination of activities by which equipment or system is kept or restored to a state in which it can be performed designated functions. So in the similar patients, most of the manufacturing organizations are vastly use the combination of activities which is basically performed by a team. And the department is simply designated maintenance management department. So if you goes to or if you take an example of steel industries or if you take the example of metal industries, they have a designated department. For example, electrical maintenance management department mechanical maintenance management department, or maybe civil maintenance management departments. So they can perform various amount of what is known as repair, restores, or maybe replace activities as per the designated function of each department. So it's a group of or combination of activities to achieve the organization goal by implementing various amount of maintenance. The next important part is efficient maintenance is a matter of having the right resources at the right place at the right time to do the right job the right ways. So whenever you seek any kind of activities, especially reference to your productions, in that cases you can directly apply that means right resources, which basically includes your tools. The next important part is equipments, spares, and right placements. Suppose you have a breakdown in case of motors, breakdown in case of that is known as gearbox. In that cases, you will usually fix that particular problem so that the flow of material should not be disrupted or disturbed, or there is no that is known as error should be observed from the flow of material from one places to other places. So these are the basic that is known as overview of maintenance and maintenance management. The next we have to focus upon the function and objective of maintenance. So as you know, in case of industrial maintenance could be considered as a subsystem of the industrial organizations. So as I told in the previous slide that you have to take the example of metal industries, or those are basically focused upon metal producing organizations. They have number of divisions, number of system and subsystems are there. So they are basically provide various amount of specific functions for a specific times. In that cases, they can avoid any kind of breakdowns, they can avoid any kind of errors, and higher side of quality should be achieved. So I am repeating the same sentence that industrial maintenance could be considered as a subsystem of an industrial organization, enabling the plant to fulfill the specific function for a specific times. So to enable the plant to achieve this, the main function performed by the maintenance are the first important part is the cleanings of the various components. The next is lubricating the various components. The next is top off or topping off the various that is known as gearboxes, motors, as well as that is known as various component of the hydraulic parts. The next we have that is known as adjustment or calibrations. So why adjustment calibration is needed? The thing is that if you not calibrate your equipments, spares, tools, so in that cases it should be converted into a large amount of that is known as machine deficiencies or errors should be observed. The next important part is condition assessment, which is known as condition based monitoring. So these are under the part of the subsystem that is known as your subsystems, where you can easily identify various amount of that is known as error from the systems, and it should be easily removed to avoid any kind of that is known as casualties or error should be observed, especially reference to maintenance management. The next important part we have that is known as repair and replacement. So if required, the repair, you can provide the repair. If it is not possible, then you can directly replace with any kind of spare parts. So these are the basic that is known as function performed by maintenance group. I'm just repeating. The first one is cleaning. The next we have lubricatings. The next is stoppings. Then adjustment or calibrations. Then condition assessment. Then repair and replacements. Moving to next one. The next one is whenever you focus upon maintenance, the maintenance subsystem requires the input of resources and informations, and it provides output in the form of plant useful lives. So, for example, if you provide large amount of maintenance services to various equipment, automatically the durability of machine should be last very long. And the next important part is in the form of plant useful life, availabilities and performance will be automatically goes for higher side. Higher side of quality should be achieved in case of product, and huge amount of safety should be observed whenever the operator is directly involved in that particular machines or that particular subsystems. The next is maintenance management find the most economical way of performing the desired maintenance functions. So if you observe the function of a maintenance subsystems, we have three that is levels are there. The first level we know that is known as inputs. The second one we have that is known as maintenance subsystems, and the third one we have that is known as outputs. So under inputs we have a huge amount of that is known as capitals in the form of finance, or finance should be required as inputs, and the large amount of information should be required and from the other systems for control and make decisions. So finance, informations, other systems, control and decision makings are basically taken as inputs. And what are the outputs? When the company invests large amount of monies, in that case, the output in the form of first one is that is known as plant safety is concerned. The next is plant conditions. The next is product quality should be, or a higher side of quality should be achieved. And in the form of that is known as informations, we got the input that is from the systems for controls and decision makings, and you can easily access this information to other department or other systems. The next important part is maintenance subsystem, which have the basic function to control the reliability of the plant to set levels. So who set the levels? Basically, the management is take the responsibility for set the levels. They can direct the workforce. They can provide the spares. They are also provide the tools, and they can easily that is known as circulate the information from top to middle and middle to functional level of organizations. So by combination of this input and that is known as maintenance functions and output, you can easily understand the function of maintenance subsystem in a particular industries, which basically inform or which basically form that is useful life in the form of that is known as plant conditions, higher set of product qualities, the performance level of each that is employees will automatically increase, the efficiency of that is known as system will be automatically higher side, and higher amount of safety should be observed whenever you focus upon this maintenance subsystem requirement input as a resource for your particular organizations. So moving to next ones, the next one we have that is known as the maintenance is the considered as a pool of resources. So in this particular resources we have manpowers, we have spares, we have tools and informations which are directed towards the achieving desired availabilities. So these are basically responsible for providing the better amount of maintenance which is directed towards achieving desired availabilities and plant condition following a maintenance plan. So before implementing the maintenance, a proper planning should be done, and that is done by the middle level of management basically, and it is executed by the functional level of employees. So in case of functional level of employees which require large amount of spare parts, tools, and various amount of skill operators should be engaged so that they can easily fix the problems, and the production flow should be easily considered from that is known as sequentially arrangement of machines. The next important part is flow is easily access of raw material from one end to other. The next we have to decide on a maintenance plan. It is necessary to establish maintenance objectives. So in case of maintenance objectives, which is predefined by the top level of management, the next important part is these objectives should be compatible with the company objectives. So as you know, the common objective is that when company invested large amount of money, they easily search for the ROIs, that is return on investments. So in that cases, the maintenance objectives should be compatible with the company objectives, which must be linked to get higher side profitability for the organizations. The next is the maintenance objectives should be to minimize the sum of direct and indirect costs. So as you know, in case of that is known as maintenance management, two type of costs are basically involved. That is direct costs for that is known as in case of spare parts, tools, and indirect costs, for example, documentations and the adequate system which is required for the maintenance management. The next is the administrative cost is also which include in case of indirect cost. So these two costs are taken into considerations for long-term effect of the maintenance decisions. So whenever the middle level of management is take the decisions related to maintenance objectives, which must be compatible with the company objective to make a large amount of profitability for the organizations, and whenever they focus on profitability, they can minimize the sum of direct cost and indirect cost, which is directly or indirectly involved in case of maintenance management. So let's take an example of this automotive service industries. So if you observe this particular image in a car or in an automobile garage or in an automotive workshop, so they properly arrange that is known as highly skilled operators are there, and properly stacking of spares and availability of large amount of that is known as tools are there, and information should be easily passed from the deck support to the number of that is known as skilled workers, and they can perform various amount of maintenance and repair work so that the vehicle will be get ready within the fraction of hours. So, in the same patience, many industries are follows this kind of that is known as maintenance objectives to minimize the maintenance costs, especially refers to direct or indirect cost, and maximize the profitability for the company or for the organization. So, moving to next one. So, as I discussed the objective of maintenance in the previous slide, then we have to understand what are the main maintenance objectives. The first one is that is known as enhance the overall equipment effectiveness by maximizing availabilities. The next one we have that is known as performance, then quality rates, and obtaining maximum return on investments. Point number two, to extend the useful life of asset by minimizing the wear and deteriorations. Point number three, to ensure operational readiness of all equipments at all times for emergency use. So you cannot avoid maintenance. So in that cases, operational readiness should be required in case of maintenance management. The next is those who are involved in case of maintenance management, their safety should be always on the priorities. So if you go to next point, to ensure the safety of personnel using facilities and achieving the acceptable safeties. So to repair a particular machines or heavy machines, you cannot that is known as put a skilled worker to a different levels to avoid that is known as any kind of hazardous activities or maybe any kind of error should be occur. So whenever you involve yourself or your teams, the safety should be given on priority basis. And the last point is that to provide all this at minimum resource cost. So these are the key that is known as maintenance objectives, which is followed by many organizations. I'm just repeating the from the past point, that is to enhance overall equipment effectiveness by minimizing the availabilities, performance, and quality rates. The next is extend the useful life of asset by minimizing wear and deteriorations to ensure operational readiness of all equipments at all times for emergency use, ensure highest level of safety for personnel using the facilities and achieve the acceptable safeties. The next one we have to provide all this at minimum resource cost. So these are the key objective of maintenance. Moving to next ones. The next one is maintenance strategies. So let's start from the word that is known as strategy. So strategy is a plan of action which is basically applied on the basis of long-term strategy or maybe short-term strategy or maybe intermediate level of strategies. So in case of maintenance management, only two strategies are basically considered. The first one is long-term strategy. The second one is short-term strategies. So before going to that long-term strategy or that is known as short-term strategies, first we have to understand what is that is known as maintenance-related strategies. So let's take an example of your that is known as domestic air conditioner services. So in case of long-term strategies, the company provide initially that is maintenance facility that is free of cost. But if you want to increase the that is known as durability of air condition, in that cases, you take the that is known as insurance coverage or maybe that is known as maintenance coverage for long amount of periods, so that they will provide adequate facilities for increase the efficiency of your air conditions, and they will perform various amount of maintenance related activities on routine basis. So in that cases, the same pattern should be observed in case of that is known as internal that is known as maintenance management of industries. So let's understand this particular point. So any industrial plant consists of different functional units. These units are divided into sections, and each section may be the number of machines. So let's take an example of that is known as steel plant, which consists of four number of division or sections, starting from the raw material handling sections. Then the next one is direct reduced iron sections. Then third one we have that is known as steel melting sections. And the fourth one we have that is known as power plant or captive power plants. So the combination of these four number of divisions is formed that is known as captive power plants or captive or integrated steel plants. So each sections consist of number of machines. For example, if you goes to steel melting shop, number of furnaces are there. If you goes to power plant, it consists of a number of boilers, then turbines, then DM water plant. Similarly, if you goes to direct reduced iron plant or sponge divisions, they have number of rotary and that is known as kilns are there. And if you goes to the known as raw material handling departments, they have number of conveyor and movable parts are there. So each division consists of number of that is known as machines and that is known as conveyors or boilers or maybe furnaces are there. So these machines are further subdivided into sub-assembles and finally into the lowest level that is known as components. So for example, if you goes to furnaces, the furnaces consist of number of that is known as components and each components each also divided into the lowest level. For example, in case of furnaces, they have hydraulic that is known as components. And in hydraulic components, you can find it is that is known as hydraulic cylinders. So this hydraulic cylinder is nothing more known as that is known as components. So many of the machine components are designed with useful life greater than the longest plant production cycles. So if you take the example of, for example, conveyor belt, which has number of rollers are there, and each roller consists of bearings. So if the bearing is a component, so the bearing has a particular lives as compared to the plant production cycles. So in most cases, such short life components will have to be identified at the design stage and made easily maintainable at the component level without affecting the plant availability or safety. So in that cases, each divisions have their own maintenance management departments. So they are implementing various amount of maintenance strategies. Some are day-to-day basis strategies, some are that is known as weekly basis strategies, and some are that is known as you can say that is known as monthly basis strategy or maybe quarterly basis strategies. So depending upon that kind of situations, if you are not ready for that situation, or if you not eliminate the part of that is known as this short life component to easily identify, or you can not provide any kind of that is known as maintainable component levels, so they can make any kind of that is known as unavoidable incident inside the organizations. So to implement various kind of maintenance strategies, most of the plants are directly focused upon component levels. So without affecting the entire production line, they will provide the maintenance strategy for component levels. Moving to next ones, to keep the plant operating at the desirable level of output and safety, a proper maintenance strategy is required. So as far as concerned with many kind of metal industries or large scale industries or maybe small scale industries or medium scale industries, depending upon their organizational structures, the maintenance strategies should be defined by the middle level of management and it is authenticated by the top level of management. When it is take the authentication from the top level of management, it directly circulate in between the middle level of management to the functional level of management so that they can easily understand the maintenance strategies should be implemented in a very short period of time so that the entire production should not be hampered. Moving to next ones, factor that influence the maintenance strategies. So in the previous slide, we have understand the maintenance objectives, how maintenance objectives is defined, and as far as concerned with the maintenance objectives, various amount of strategy of maintenance or maintenance strategy should be implemented. So as I told in the last slide that the maintenance strategy may be short-term maintenance strategy or maybe long-term maintenance strategies. So let's take the discussions. What are the factors which are basically affect the maintenance objective? The first important part is internal resource levels. So in case of internal resource levels, you have to optimize the level of various resources so that you can implement various amount of maintenance related strategies. For example, in case of inventories, you have to optimize the level of inventories, no excess, that is known as procurement of inventories, and you have to maintain optimum levels so that whenever it is required, required, we can easily access, that is known as fast in or fast out basis. The next is contract resource policies. The next we have plant condition and age is there. Then long-term production requirements. The next we have that is known as short-term production requirements. And the most important part is that is known as safety requirements. So whenever you that is known as activate your maintenance objectives, you have to given the priority for the safeties. So most of the companies, the safety departments take the major responsibilities by implementing various safety requirements whenever the operators, workers, or employees have performed various amount of maintenance strategies. The next is statutory inflections. So as far as concerned with the maintenance strategies, these are the factors which is directly affect the maintenance strategies. I'm repeating. The first one is internal resource levels, contract resource policies, plant condition and the age of plant. Then next one is whenever the company focus upon long-term production requirement or maybe the short-term production requirements. The next we have safety requirement or statutory inspection. These are basically affect the maintenance strategies directly. Moving to next one. The next one is whenever you focus upon maintenance strategies, it is concerned with identify the components. So we have departments, then sub-departments, and each sub-department consists of number of machines, and each machine have number of components, and we are basically identifying those components which might require maintenance. For example, as I give in the last slide, that in a steel plant which consists of a raw material handling departments. So most of the cases, the raw material handling department has number of conveyor belts from the stockyard to the processing centers or the production centers. So in that cases, the conveyor consists of number of rollers and each roller consists of number of bearings. So if you identify the component like bearings, the due to higher side of dust, due to higher side of weight, it may be that is known as effect. So it is immediately required maintenance and determine the most appropriate maintenance procedures. So if you go to any kind of industries, they have the standard operating procedure for maintenance. So being an employee of that particular industry, you have to follow the SOPs and the guidelines, the policy, the code of conduct of maintenance, so that we can easily perform various amount of procedures which is predefined by the plant. So I'm repeating the first point. The maintenance strategy is concerned with identifying the component of plant which might require maintenance and determining the most appropriate maintenance procedures and then listing the procedure in the form of schedule for the plant. The next we have the maintenance strategy is a function of production maintenance relationship. Therefore, in the most situation will be subject to change. So depending upon the type of industry, depending upon the type of division inside the industries, and depending the type of that is known as subsystem in the industry, you have to change the maintenance strategy, which is vastly focused upon higher side of production maintenance relationships. So here the common use maintenance strategy we have. The first one is breakdown maintenance, or which is known as corrective maintenance. The next we have that is known as fixed time maintenance or preventive maintenance. The next one we have that is known as condition based maintenance, which is shortly known as CBM. The next is we have opportunistic maintenance, and the last one is design out maintenance. So we'll discuss one by one, starting from the breakdown maintenance to design out maintenance. Moving to the first one. So before going to the various mode of recognized maintenance strategies, we have to first understand the classification of maintenance. So as we have discussed the maintenance, the fundamentals, that is the science or arts, or that is the philosophy, which is basically goes for collective work to achieve higher side of production related goals, quality related goals, customer satisfactions. The next important part is longer plant, that is known as life should be achieved. But the thing that first you have to understand what is the classification of maintenance. So maintenance is of that is known as two types, so unplanned maintenance and planned maintenance. So in case of unplanned maintenance, we have breakdown maintenance, and in case of planned maintenance, we have preventive maintenance or corrective maintenance. And the third one we have that is known as fixed and predictive maintenance. And if you go for further classification of maintenance, we have time-based maintenance and we have daily maintenance are there. But in the other side, we have predictive maintenance is there, which is known as condition-based or if you further classify it, these are known as condition-based maintenance. So this is the classification of maintenance. I'm repeating. The maintenance is classified into two types. One is planned maintenance and unplanned maintenance. So in case of planned maintenance, we have breakdown maintenance, and unplanned maintenance, we have breakdown maintenance, and planned maintenance, we have preventive maintenance, and the next one we have that is known as corrective maintenance. If you go for further classifications, it is of two types, that is known as fixed and predictive, that is known as maintenance. So if you go for further classification of fixed maintenance, that is known as time-based maintenance or daily-based maintenance, and in case of predictive, that is known as condition-based maintenance. So moving to next one. So as I discussed, the various that is known as mode of that is known as strategies should be used by various industries. The first one we have that is known as breakdown maintenance or corrective maintenance. So let's understand what is breakdown maintenance. So in case of breakdown maintenance, the equipment is allowed to run till it breaks down and then maintain it and putting back into the operations. So if you have large amount of that is known as manpowers or that is known as skill operator, you can easily fix. But think about the situations or think about the weight and volume of machines. Think about the that is known as the situation of machines. For example, so the machine is highly affected by the thermal conditions. In that cases, it is very much difficult. For example, furnace bearings. For example, large number of that is known as hydraulics, which is used in case of loading or unloading of various equipments. For example, unloadings of various conveyors. So these are large amount of machine. In that cases, the breakdown maintenance, you cannot fix any kind of machines without the skilled operator, without the proper equipment, or without any kind of safety. So in that cases, most of the maintenance tasks are reactive to the breakdowns or production interruptions. And the only focus of these tasks is how quickly the machine or system can be returned to service. So it is most of the cases we observe in case of Indian industry sectors. So this breakdown maintenance are basically happens when the machine is failed. So by the in presence of that is large amount of that is known as skilled workers, this can be easily fixed and they can directly restore to the same condition so that the operation should not be interrupted. So the next one is the breakdown maintenance. Most of the corrective maintenance work poorly planned because of the times and constraints. So here the drawback of breakdown maintenance are that it can be very poorly planned because of the times, because time constraints there. Some machines breakdown takes large amount of times. Some machine are very critical. Some machine consist of very complex spare parts. So in that cases, the time constraint is there. So they can directly interrupt the entire production process. So to avoid those cases, you can use the that is only imposed by the production plant management. So it is most of the taken the decision is making by the top level of management. The next important part is breakdown or reactive maintenance may cost 3 to 4 times more than the corrective maintenance work when it is well planned. So that is why it is very much that is one is focused upon nowadays. Most of the industry are focused upon corrective maintenance plan so that they can easily avoid this kind of breakdown maintenance because time constant is there, large amount of cost should be involved, and the next important part is it is very much labor intensive nowadays. So in that scenario, you cannot provide the breakdown maintenance. Depending upon the situations, the time constraint is there, and to avoid these kind of things, most of the company are implementing corrective maintenance. Moving to next one. The next one is that whenever you apply the corrective maintenance, the corrective maintenance is limited to those tasks performed in order to restore the machine or the system to acceptable operating conditions after the failure is occurred. So in that cases, before you implementing the corrective maintenance, you can take large amount of known as corrective maintenance tasks. So what are the tasks we have? The first important part is fault detections, then fault isolations, the fault eliminations. The last one we have verification that fault has been eliminated. Because these are causes large amount of damage to various amount of machines, especially applies to movable machines like EOT crane or overhead travel cranes, large amount of conveyor plates, conveyor belts. The next important part is highly heat affected zones like boilers or maybe turbine areas. It is very much difficult. So first you have to take the that is known as corrective maintenance tasks, just like fault detections. I'm just repeating. The next one is fault isolations. The next we have fault eliminations and the verification of the fault that has been eliminated from the systems. So moving to next one. So for fault eliminations may be accomplished in any one of the three ways, depending on the nature of faults. So if you observe this particular figure, when a fire incident was takes place in a particular that is manufacturing environment, people are that is known as the thrill to run everywhere. So rather than you go for that is known as identify the fault, and if you identify it, it is up to your level. You can easily eliminate it. Is if it is not up to your levels, in that cases you have to go for that is known as various that is known as uh, fault elimination tasks. The first one we have adjust, align, and calibrate. The second one we have repair, and the third one we have that is known as remove and replace. So these three that is known as fault elimination process is applied in case of manufacturing industries. Those who are only focus upon that is known as product oriented industries. So I just repeat: first one is adjust, align, or calibrate. The second one we have repair, and the third one we have remove and replace. So moving to next one, we will discuss the first one like adjust, align, and calibrate. So before going to discuss about this point related to adjust, align, and calibrate, let's take an example of your own motorcycles. So the if you take the entire systems of motorcycles, we have different subsystems are there. For example, wheels, engines. The next is the transmissions parts. The next is your ignition parts. The next is carburetors. So we take a small example of carburetors. So if you want to increase the mileage, or if you want to that is known as uh, the fuel efficiency, you can directly adjust the carburetor. So automatically the bike or the motorcycle mileage will be, or fuel efficiency will be automatically increased. So that is the concept of adjust, or you can simply go for that is known as calibrate the carburetor in a such a way that the fuel efficiency is automatically increased. So the next important part is before understanding this overview of that is known as adjust, align, or calibrate. The first important part is restoring the equipments or the system acceptable function condition by the adjustment. So if it is possible, you can adjust the equipments or align or calibration should be done so that the component should be perform the various that is known as performance parameters, which is predefined by the companies. The next important part is to adjust is to vary the setting of controllers until the performance parameters that is controls is brought into a acceptable state or fall within the acceptable regions. So for example, previously the motorcycle mileage was 40. So if I go for adjusting the carburetors, the mileage is increased. In that case, it is acceptable range. But if the fuel efficiency is reduced, in that cases you have to go for that is known as calibrate the entire thing, starting from the that is known as carburetor calibrations. The next one, align the different wheels properly. Then engine pistons alignment should be done. The next is crankshaft to that is known as your piston should be properly done. The next important part you have to focus upon ignition system. So many things are there. So if you go for that is as I told this motorcycle examples, adjusting the carburetor of automobiles for minimum fuel consumptions at cruising speed is an example of carrying out the adjustments. So these kind of activities should be done in case of various organizations. As I told, that is known as it is applicable to various components, just like motors, just like hydraulics machines, just like gear, or just like your transformation machines, which is basically applied inside the subfloors. So moving to next one, the next one is repairs. So in case of repair, this is physically altering of faulty components to restore to its original designated structures or functional condition or to another condition deemed acceptable. So commonly used rework method are basically known as the welding process, or you can go for the known as soldering process, or you must go for patching, or that is known as adhesive bonding process, or the last one is reinforcing processor. These are the common that is known as rework processor there. So why rework is most important part? Because some parts, if your machine has consists of very complex parts and it is not readily available. So in that cases, you must go for that is known as repair works by applying that is known as welding, soldering, patching, bonding, or maybe reinforcing work. So here I have given the example of that is known as washing machines, and in that cases, most of the cases the parts are made of that is known as plastics or that is known as say reinforced plastics. So many movable parts are there. If it is required, you can directly go for repair by that is known as adhesive bondings. In some cases, you go for fiber weldings. In some cases, you can, special reference to electron circuit of washing machine, must go for that is known as soldering process. So these are the common rework method which is used by many industries. So if you go to point number 3, that is known as repair is a particular applicable to the correction of failures originated in the faulty interconnections utilizations media such as wiring, piping, processes, mechanical linkage or optical fibers. So these applicables are failure originated in the faulty interconnecting utilizations. So these are the overview of your repair maintenance work. The next we have that is known as remove and replace. So before understanding this particular concept of remove and replace, let's take the example of your own car, which consists of that is known as the rubber tires or tires. And if you think that the tire is the grip is reduced up to a certain levels, it need to be replaced. So same kind of thing should be observed when the life of bearing is basically done, basically visualized or basically checked. It is not up to the level of that is known as rotating or not transferring the raw material from one end to other end. It should be easily, it should be removed and replaced so that it should not be hamper the entire production process. So here in case of remove and replace, the restoring malfunctioning machines or system to be properly operating condition by removing the faulty component or sub-assemble and replacing it with a properly functioning spare component or assemble with no repair involved. So here there is no condition is applied for repair by the help of welding, soldering, bridging process. Here you can simply replace the particular part which have a malfunctions, which have errors, which is damaged. So the life of machine will automatically increase. So let's take an example of bikes here. So in that cases, what will happen? Most of the cases we can directly replace the that is known as piston valves, because it has a certain amount of life. So after crossing that particular life, we can easily replace because it perform or it directly affect various amount of it is known as fuel efficiencies, drive fault, or many kind of error in case of your automobiles. Moving to next one. The next one we have that is known as fixed time maintenance or preventive periodic maintenance. So here in case of maintenance is carried out predetermined interval or to other prescribed criteria to reduce the likelihood of a equipment or system not meeting an acceptable conditions. So here it is assumed that the mechanical failures, deteriorations process are depending upon the time in a predictable or predictable ways. So the advantage of maintenance strategies implement here, and it is basically compared to the breakdown maintenance. The first important part is the number of unexpected shutdown is reduced. So unexpected shutdown is not reduced. It is not in the hand of that is known as people. It is maybe the failure of that is known as small components or to failure of the systems. The next is risk of secondary damage causes initial failures is reduced. Then best resource of utilizations or better use of that is resource utilizations. The next is reduce overtime cost or more economical use of maintenance worker due to working on a schedule basis instead of crash basis to repair breakdown. The next is reduce the product reject, then rework and scrap due to the better overall equipment conditions, and it also improve the safety and quality conditions. So whenever you go for fixed maintenance or which is known as that is preventive predict maintenance, in that cases these are the basic advantage which is compared to the breakdown maintenance. So I'm just repeating, the number of unexpected shutdown is reduced, Then secondary damage causes initial failure is reduced. Then better resource utilizations, reduce overtime cost, most economical use of maintenance workers, and that maintenance worker is used on the basis of that is known as crash basis to repair the breakdown, reduce the product reject, rework or scrap work of equipment, and it also improve the safety as well as the quality condition of your maintenance. So these are the advantages of maintenance strategy which is compared to the breakdown maintenance. The next one we have that is known as limitation of preventive predictive maintenance. So let's discuss what are the limitations. So the limitations in case of point number one, the method does not give full protection from the unexpected shutdowns. So you cannot avoid unexpected shutdowns. Clear? So in that cases, it is very much difficult. Some of the maintenance action may not be necessary. For example, over oilings, over greasing of equipments. The next important part is over cleaning of the machine. The next is periodic maintenance causes an increased number of running failures. So if you implement the periodic maintenance, it may be causes any kind of number of running failures which is directly affect your entire production flow. And if incidental failures are predominant, periodic replacement may not have any positive effect on the reliability of your maintenance. So these are the limitation of your preventing periodic maintenance. Moving to next one. The next one commonly used preventing maintenance tasks. The first one we have servicings. The second one we have condition assessment on condition remedial actions. The third one we have verification of hidden functions, and the fourth one we have scheduled replacement. So let's discuss one by one so that you can easily understand what is servicings, what is condition assessment, and on condition remedial actions. The next one we have verification of hidden functions and scheduled replacements. So in case of service or servicings, the tasks must be performed periodically to ensure that the equipment will remain in proper operating conditions. So servicing includes, but it is not necessarily limited to, the first one is replacement of consumables such as fuel. The next is depletable like lubricant, battery, electrolytes, coolant fluids, air in pneumatic tires, and minor adjustment or alignment, the cleaning of permanent filters, especially refers to oil filters, other critical surfaces subject to contaminations, for example, leads in case of battery. The next is lubrication, composition of lubrications, then coolant or composition of coolant. These are contain various amount of contaminations, especially harm to the human body. And the replacement of expendable filters and other short-lived items. So these are the basic that is known as servicing, which is properly operating conditions, and these servicings include in case of various that is known as a system, subsystem, then component and spare parts levels, especially reference to manufacturing industries. Moving to next one. The next one is condition assessment and on condition remedial actions. So we have to understand in case of condition assessment is the evaluation of physical conditions of equipment component known to be subject to wear or other form of deteriorations. So it is performed during the scheduled inspection of the equipments. The next one we have on the basis of evaluation, it is decided whether the item can be safely permitted to the remain in use until the next scheduled inspection or subject or should be subjected to the remedial actions. So in case of normal condition assessment is performed. So what are the normal conditions? So we have to learn. The first one is surface that wear out or corrode, that is bearing surface, tire threads, DC motor commuters, and DC motor brushes. So these are basically used by condition assessment or on conditional remedial action will be immediately taken. The next is mechanism subject to misalignment, excessive play in case of mechanical operating except. For example, in case of drive shaft, in case of engines, drive shaft in case of gearbox to the movable parts. So if it is not properly aligned, in that cases, it will go for excessive play. So excessive play will lead towards that is known as mechanical uncontrol of that is known as machines. The next is item that accumulate containment interface with the operation, that is radiator cores through which fluid coolant will circulate. So these are the basic example of that is known as that is used in case of normally condition assessment should be done. Moving to next one. The next one is condition assessment method. We have discussed how they have performed various amount of condition assessment. The first one is visual examinations. In the figure you have to observe one person is directly identify the various amount of this welding joint and surface by visual examinations. So if it is up to the levels, they can directly inform the authorities. If it is not up to the levels, they can perform various amount of condition assessment. The next one is measurement of physical and or functional attributes using appropriate test equipments. Then various spatial and non-destructive testing or techniques should be used to go for condition assessment. So in case of condition assessment, it is done only for the attributes of subject to degradation that ultimately leads to failures. So it is very much important nowadays. Most of the industry, especially reference to industry 4.0, they are basically use this condition assessment in various movable parts, especially reference to system, subsystem, and component levels. So if possible, they can conduct a visual examination. If possible, they go for physical and functional attributes to testing the machines. If required, they will go for various amount of that is known as non-destructive testings by using various amount of electronics that is known as sensors. And condition assessment is only done to attributes which the machines which rapidly decrease its degradation ultimately leads to other failures. So moving to next one, the next one we have verification of hidden functions. So in case of verification of hidden functions, these are the functions not exercised during the normal operations of the equipment or the systems. Why? So let's take an example of your electric circuit breakers. One of the example of that is known as verification hidden functions. So if you find the motor is out of alignment, the pump is out of alignment, which provide a very that is known as loud noise. In that cases, you can use the verification of hidden function in the form of circuit breakers. So the circuit or the subsystem performing the hidden function must be exercised particularly to verify the still the capable of performing the function. So typically the hidden function are emergency or reluctant function. So as I told, in case of motor is running out of alignment, which produce large amount of noise, the noise in the form of the bearing noise is there, the brush noise is there. So in that cases, you can directly use that is known as hidden function like emergency circuit breakers, which can immediately shut down the entire processes. So this circuit breaker perform an emergency function, and they are basically the backup power to supply the performance and reductant the function that enhance the reliability of the systems. So both are hidden functions that are special techniques. So in case of that is known as operating various complex machines like CNC machines, like lathe machines, they can use that is known as power levers. So if you find any kind of difficulties, in that cases you can directly put down the power lever to the off level so that the entire process should be able and the machine will be safe. And those who perform on that particular machine, their life also will be safe. So both hidden function that are required special techniques and where the feasible and build in test provisions are verified that the capability is available when needed. So these are basically written when you join a particular organizations, and before joining they can provide the standard operating procedure or standard operating procedure manuals specially reference to maintenance management. Moving to next one. The next one we have scheduled replacements. So every organization have their scheduled replacement is applied to various amount of components. So what are the component we will discuss and what are the criteria we have discussed? The first one is failure of component would endanger the personnel or equipment or would reduce the operational availabilities of the equipment below the minimum acceptable levels. So when a person is that is involved in a particular machines, if he find any kind of that is known as equipment is going to be errors, in that cases they can reduce the operational availability by availability of the equipment below the minimum acceptable levels. The next important part is failure mode is unsuitable for condition assessment, which is preferred preventive maintenance methods. And the last point we have that is known as useful lifespan of component that less than intended operating the life of product and can be determined accurately. So these are the scheduled replacements, and every organization have their own that is known as maintenance calendar. So it is basically circulated among the that is known as individuals, those who are directly involved in case of maintenance work, and they can easily go for that is known as scheduled replacement applies. For example, replacement of bearings, replacement of bushings, replacement of grease, replacement of engine oils, replacement of hydraulic oils. These are also in the process of scheduled replacement so that the machine will be work in a effective conditions to maximize the performance levels. Moving to next one, the next one we have condition-based monitoring, especially reference to Industry 4.0. This condition-based monitoring is applied. So let's understand what is the concept behind that is known as condition-based maintenance. So here what will happen, the equipment is maintained when the measurement indicated is anticipation failures. So there are so many that is known as conditions monitoring should be done, especially reference to vibrations, wear debris. The next is higher side of temperatures, and if the machine is not operating under the performance parameters. So these are the condition is applied. Then point number 3, we have any change in any of these parameters would mean to change in the condition of or health of the machines. The implementing the condition-based monitoring or maintenance involved. The first one is measurement. Large amount of that is known as soft tools and electronics tools and sensor are basically used to monitor the appropriate physical variables or signature of the machine using various kind of instrument as I told, and interpreting the signature to indicate if the maintenance of machine is called for or not. So as I told that large amount of sensor based electronics and instruments are basically used to calibrate and adjust the battery basic machines, and they are basically indicate various amount of performance parameter. For example, a motor consists of two number of bearings. If one bearing is provide noise, in that cases it directly increase the temperature of various shaft. So due to increase of temperature, the performance parameters should not be achieved by the motors. So in that cases, immediately the replacement work or corrective maintenance should be used. So that is the concept behind condition-based monitoring. So it is not affect the entire production, but also save the machines, save the breakdown time, save large amount of that is known as operators' lives who are directly involved in the maintenance work. Moving to next one. The next one we have, this is the production that is known as condition-based maintenance. So here what will happen, we have go for that is known as preventive failures intervals. So before implementing the predictive maintenance, we have identified the various amount of that is known as fault. For example, we have smoke in case of gearbox or motors, then higher side of heat, then higher noise, oil analysis, thermographic analysis. So these are the relative conditions. So whenever you visualize these conditions, immediately you go for preventive maintenance. So some amount of that is known as preventive maintenance is applied for thermographic corrections or oil analysis, but reactive maintenance is applied for the noise and heat and smokes. So the next important part is if your machine is under the vibration analysis, immediately you go for predictive, that is known as maintenance should be applied. So as I told, that is known as if you find this PF interval, that is known as preventive and failure interval, in that cases you can apply the predictive maintenance or in the form of condition-based maintenance, so that you can easily implement any kind of error from your systems. So the next important part is the flow diagram of your condition monitoring process. The next one is that is known as flow diagram condition monitoring process. How the plant are basically applied this condition monitoring. The first one is plant surface. So under survey, you have to identify which division has which type of machines. The next we have machine selections. The next we have that is known as selection condition monitoring techniques, whether you go for visualize or maybe non-destructive testings. The next we have established the maintenance procedures, maybe unplanned procedure or that is known as planned procedures. The next we have set and review the acceptable limits. Then baseline measurement should be done. So under baseline measurement, so many parameters are there. Then we have routine monitors, then data recordings. Then you have to perform the trend analysis. So if the trend analysis is not up to the levels, again you go for set the reviews at acceptable limits, then baseline measurement, then routine monitoring, then data recordings. So in this regard, you have to perform the various amount of fault diagnosis, and the next is prognosis analysis should be done. So after that one, you have to go for plan and carry out maintenance activities by deploying your that is known as maintenance team to the specific area or specific machines. So thank you. We'll conclude the session here.